Good evening, con enw I, a fi'n gweithio i bwydydd Castell Howell. I guess quite a few of you would be familiar with the company, but I'll give you a quick overview first. Is that okay? So here we are, Castell Howell. We deliver some 14,500 different products. They're not all different. Some of them are in different case sizes. To some 6,000 customers. We employ some 700 people and 800 vehicles. And last year we celebrated our 35th year anniversary. So still a family company based down in Crosshands, but our spiritual home is in Carmarthen, which is kind of where I met Brian and the family and Young Farmers in St. Peter's. So anybody from Carmarthen, who went to Young Farmers, will be familiar with that club, no doubt. So we've got 6 depots and 5 food manufacturing sites. And again, we're still a family firm. Ni dal yn cwmni deuluol lawr yn Sir Gar. Right, fan hyn nawr, fi fynycha teimlo bach fel Derek Brockway ar y map bach hyn yn dangos rhywun fel dangos y tywydd. And this is kind of the concentration of our customers. So you can see we're, no surprises, we're kind of heavily concentrated on the M4 corridor from Crosshands through to Cardiff, Newport and further afield in Bristol. And then up the west coast of Wales, Aberaeron, Aberystwyth, ac ati. And then North Wales is a newish area for ourselves. We opened a depot in North Wales back in 2011-ish. And since then we've been expanding to North East and North West Wales through our depots. Again, our HQ there in Crosshands, if you can see the little circle there. So Crosshands, Carmarthen, little sub-depot there in Merthyr Tydfil, which services the valleys and up Brecon Way and Hereford. Moved to the depot in Porthmadog a couple of years ago, initially from the depot in Blaenau Ffestiniog. Small depot in Chirk, which is only just in Wales, but that services North East, up into the Wirral, Liverpool, Cheshire, a little bit out to Stoke-on-Trent. And then the depot in Avonmouth it's been there for around 15 years. So we've been expanding down across that M4 into Bristol, Chippenham, Bath and the Cotswolds for quite a few years. So that's pretty much us as a company. And just to give you a little value of the food service sector here in the UK. Food service is defined really food where you eat outside the home. So we don't supply any retailers. We might supply a couple of delicatessens, but any of the larger retailers isn't who we supply. So the food service sector is worth some 57 billion, which is quite a bit of money there, and is the 4th largest employer in the UK. And that covers everybody from school catering, university catering, I guess McDonald's, KFC, restaurants, the people we have here, Cwm Gwaun Catering, they all come under food service, of which there's some 360,000 different outlets. And some of you may have worked in some of them, but certainly today you will be supporting the food service sector in some way or form. So it is kind of fragmented. Compared to the retail sector, you have your large players, Tesco, Morrisons, Sainsbury's, Asda, Aldi and Lidl, etc. But it's a little bit different in food service because you've got some larger caterers like Wetherspoons, for example, and Green King and McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut and those. But you've also got sort of smaller customers, and there's many in your towns, hopefully customers of ours. So we're looking at institutional dining in hospitals and schools. Now we supply some 1,200 schools in Wales and England, so we've got quite a good feel of that sector. And of course, fine dining restaurants. We've got a few of those in Wales, some Michelin star restaurants, gastropubs, etc. Street food, that's become very popular in the past few years, kind of food to go. Coffee shops, of which some might say they're the saviour of the high street. I remember a couple of years ago when they opened the first Starbucks in Llanelli, and I thought, Moredd, people in our neck of the woods are prepared to pay $3.50 for a skinny latte. But that seems to be the way that the sector's gone. Where kind of wet-led pubs or drinking pubs, they're kind of gradually closing, but you see the emergence of coffee shops. And I live in Llandilo, and hyd yn ôl yn Llandilo, os allwn ni cyfri'r sawl tafarn sydd wedi cael yn Llandeilo yn y 10 mlynedd diwetha. In a small town like Llandeilo, I think in the last 20 years, probably 5 or 6 pubs have closed, but we seem to be okay on coffee shops and places to go and have a nice latte and a caramel slice and that kind of thing. Hotels, really big part of our customer. So where does this kind of fit into Wales here? And back to the food chain. So if I may, I'd like to take you for a little bit of a journey down to our side of the food chain and try and make the link the best I can on everybody who you see on your left there and how it kind of impacts farming and how farming impacts the sector. So we've got 2 typical farms in Wales. I think, well, there's a sheep farm there, got off the internet. My guess is that's in Gwynfe because you can see Picwsti in the background there, so I put that on. That's just up the road from myself. And then we've got a potato harvesting operation down there, down in Pembrokeshire. So 2 very different types of farming, but still here, indigenous here in Wales. Right, our customers. Everything that we do, I know this sounds a bit obvious, it all ends up there. That is the final destination of our food chain, the plate. And there you've got some really nice lamb chops. I think it's probably a nice bit of mashed potato, bit of spinach or chard there, or fennel, I can't quite make it out. So that's a really nice bit of food, but that plate has got to deliver on so many different fronts. So first thing, it's got to be safe. So whatever's been put out on the plate with our customers and yourselves at home, it can't make you ill. So safety is a priority, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. It's got to be tasty. We've got to eat it, so the taste is very important. When you go out for a meal, you don't want it to make you ill. You want it to be tasty, and it's got to deliver good value. Now, good value might be, it might be a breakfast in a cafe for £6, or it might be something a little bit more expensive in a gastro-type restaurant, or it might be school meals for £2.80 or something. So whatever the perception of value is, that plate has got to deliver there. Now, that used to be the way it was up until, perhaps 15 or so years ago. But that plate has also got to deliver on things like nature stewardship and biodiversity. Quite a few of our customers, especially the public sector, they're asking for information, what's happening in that supply chain. Beginning to ask, and that's going to gain momentum, no doubt. It's got to be... in Wales, we have the the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, of which the Welsh language is integral. So there's elements there. You're looking back into the communities and the Welsh-speaking communities here in Wales. Starting to look at the environmental impact. What is the impact of that plate, and how is that going to influence the consumer's choice? Again, social value and community. What is it bringing back to communities in Wales and further afield in the UK? And of course, we're looking at food security. Only in the past 10 months, we saw back in February time, we ran out of tomatoes and peppers. You saw the headlines on the news there. Even though there's probably plenty of tinned tomatoes and other options. But food security is critical, and we're seeing in our supply chains real pressures which didn't really exist 10 or 15 years ago. And there's all kinds of reasons behind that, of which I'm going to go into one of them, and we're going to have a look at what we're doing with horticulture. So we're going to pip bach ar yn projectau ni gyda garddwriaeth, which aligns quite nicely to Farming Connect. Previously it was Tyfu Cymru under Lantra, but it's now Farming Connect. And these are some of the projects we're involved in a whole supply chain initiative. Oh, and this is the key one. Sorry, I forgot that. It has to deliver nutrition. That's ultimately what it's all about, isn't it? We eat to feed ourselves, to keep the engine going. And perhaps at times when you're going out for a meal, perhaps you don't necessarily want to know if that sticky toffee pudding or the ice cream is full of calories and fat, etc. But when it comes to public sector nutrition, that is key, especially for schools and hospitals. So ultimately, that's what it's all about today. Right, if you have a look at our global supply chain, As we said, we buy from Wales, we buy from the UK, and we buy globally. And that's kind of the way the supply chains have evolved over the past 20 years. So what we're looking at here as Castell, we're part of the challenge, we're part of a wider problem possibly, but hopefully we can be some kind of part to a solution as well. So when you're looking at our global supply chains, you can see some real challenges this year, and I've just highlighted a couple. Nôl yn mis Mawrth, back in March, we had perfect storm Morocco. A lot of our tomatoes and peppers in the UK were imported from Northern Africa. They had some really bad weather there. They had unseasonal cold weather, meant the tomatoes, etc., couldn't come through. And there was some political backdrop there as well, of course. And then fast forward a little bit to April, May, Spain had record temperatures. And we saw that going across Europe this year. Italy, Greece, forest fires, so on and so forth. So things are changing out there. And politically, one thing where we're really focused on is what's happening in the Netherlands. So you can see there protests in the Netherlands against the government wanting to reduce the environmental impact of the farms. So that means there might be a reduction in agricultural output in the Netherlands. So there's been farmers' protests, tractors blocking roads, and so on and so forth. So we're very mindful of all of this going on, which some of it is beyond our control. And this kind of highlights the importance of what's happening in Netherlands. So os ydrychwn ni fan hyn, chi ffili gweld really, you probably can't see, it's a bit small. But if you have a look at this is the agricultural output of the Netherlands last year. So you're looking there, onions, they produced 1 million tons of onions. Beth sydd dan I can't see myself. Tomatoes, thank you. Tomatoes, 835,000 tons of tomatoes, carrots, which I probably should eat a bit more of, I'd see them myself then. Carrots, I can't even see 525,000 tons, and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of that is being shipped into the UK, and not so long ago, we'd look at Netherlands and think that's an agricultural model to follow. But fast forward 20 years, it's quite precarious. If we're relying exclusively on some of those countries for our vegetables, not all of them, especially frozen vegetables, because as a company, we buy some 1,500 tons of frozen veg from the Netherlands. Now, there's reasons behind that on investment within their country, large companies, but that's just the way it is. And around 2,000 tons of potato products, mashed potato chips, jacket potatoes. So any challenges there and further afield is going to impact on our supply chain. And we're quite small players in the UK, we really are. So if I was somebody like, I don't know, Bid Foods or Breaks, who are really big companies in the food sector, you'd be quite nervous looking at all of these figures. So what are we going to do about it? So I guess we've been in a project, it's only very small scale, in how we can transfer some of that horticultural volume which comes from the Netherlands back here to Wales. And the picture there is down on the Gwent levels, it's a 7-acre field, one of the suppliers we've been working with. How do we move that from the left-hand side to the right-hand side? And despite sounding quite an easy thing to do, nothing is that straightforward, unfortunately. But with a bit of help and a bit of do-how, bit of oomph, this is what we're trying to achieve as a supply chain and as Castell Howell and with our stakeholders. So if you can look on the left there, again, I'm going to ask my colleague in the front there, I can't read it. Right. If every primary school in Wales had 2 portions of veg coming from Welsh farmers, we'd need roughly 5,300 tonnes, and that would double the horticultural requirement of what we have in Wales, which is quite fragmented anyway. So there's some estimations. It would bring something like £50 million back to the economy, and it would, and it would double the horticultural capacity of Wales. So how do we kind of go on that journey, and how do we kind of make that happen? So that was last year. We had a project last year with courgettes, very small volume, but it did kind of make us think, and it instigated this year's, which we got a larger cohort of suppliers, and one of whom we are up in Howell, so that's where we are on the right-hand side there. So we're working with 3 growers who are kind of smaller scale growers, if you like, and they're growing agroecologically, so they're growing organically, if you like, but some of them aren't accredited. So we can start to really piece together, if you remember the slide I had on the plate, how all of those added benefits and added values, how we can start delivering them through vegetables grown in Wales. Now this guy here, I've pointed him out in an arrow. He's not on the most wanted or anything, but there's more than one way to get vegetables into the public sector, and I'll focus on schools if I may. So we can either deliver them in as fresh, but there's some challenges there. Sometimes chefs they can't deal with fresh. They haven't got the time. They might be contaminated with soil, and safety is critical. We can deliver them as prepped veg, so florets, neu sliced carrots, neu fluted carrots, rhywbeth yn debyg. Or we can add them into multi-portion meals, which is one way where we can extend the shelf life. So if you make them into meals, freeze them down, when we harvest the veg, they can be released back into the system, not necessarily in season, but they are veg which is being grown in Wales and going back into that supply chain. So this is an example of what we're doing with Farming Connect and TV Cymru as they were. The first thing is to manage that risk. And I said the picture of the plate, the first thing which is critical for us is food safety. We can't be making people ill. It doesn't really matter where it comes from if it makes somebody ill. So with the help of Farming Connect, the 3 growers, well, working with them to identify where their risk is on the farm in terms of even water to irrigate plants. Is that clean? Where does it come from? Does it come from the rivers? Is it from a borehole? Is it from mains? Quito? 10 munud ar ôl, okay. 2 slides to this on it, okay. And even things like, there was a great slide in terms of where trees are planted and what kind of veg is planted underneath. Because on some of the closed veg, an example the guy gave who's leading on this is, let's say for example he'd seen it, an acorn this time of year, acorns could fall into, let's say, Savoy cabbages or certain types of vegetables. That closes in, and essentially we're delivering an allergen into our customers because an acorn has fallen in. Now that might seem very unlikely, but these are the things we really have to consider, because somebody at the end of that supply chain, if you're delivering allergens in through celery or mustard, then as we saw with, it was a horrific case, the girl who unfortunately passed away with sesame seeds a couple of years ago. Something as innocent as sesame seeds can cause death. So safety is critical. So that's kind of what we're working with our cohort there. But likewise, where that risk in the supply chain sits. And unfortunately, too much of the risk does sit with a grower, as it is now. So what we're trying to do is to, armed with the information we've had this year and last year, is to look at a scheme whereby we can ask farmers to contract grow on our behalves. We're not quite there yet, but if we can do that, then I think we're introducing efficiencies. We can work with them, and this is kind of where the supply chain needs to work with the growers insofar as perhaps paying for the seeds, helping them with their cash flow, perhaps giving them a little bit of money beforehand to pay for staff, etc. Efficiencies in equipment and so on and so forth. And I feel this is a really big opportunity for certain types of farms in Wales, but it's going to take a little while to align everything together, because when it comes to school menus work on a 2 or 3 week cycle. And those of you who've got children, you've probably seen it on Parent Pay, where you can choose the meals beforehand, or you see the children going into school. So what we can't do when we're delivering veg or fresh veg is, if there's any, as we're seeing today, it's quite wet and windy. If you can't go out to harvest the veg, let's say carrots, and it's on the school menu on Friday, you've got to deliver something in. We can't let the children or any customers go without. So we've got to build in contingencies into the whole supply chain and kind of work together. But that's kind of where I hope ourselves, like wholesalers, we can aggregate produce from all different areas to make sure we've got that availability for schools, hospitals, and all other kind of customers. So it's fascinating, but for something which seems so simple, grow it, prepare it, cook it, feed it, there's quite a few variables there. And well, the biggest one really is, do the children want to eat veg? And that's a really big one to overcome, even though it might sound a bit ridiculous, but when you're trying to feed children, I'll just to illustrate the point, a couple of years ago, we donated free broccoli to a local authority to give extra portions to the children. Unfortunately, a lot went into the bin, and that was really disheartening, not from a cost point of view, but from, you think you're doing the right thing, put in a bit of extra broccoli, but children, they've got a split second to make that choice in the kitchen, haven't they, in that restaurant, whether to say yes or no. So a lot of work needs to be done and looking at a whole school approach to food. Right, my last slide now, and this is where I mentioned nutrition. We're working in collaboration with Aberystwyth University and Aber Innovation to try our best. If food security, if we think our supply chain globally isn't resilient, a lot of food does go to waste. So I think what needs to be introduced to the conversation is whatever the yields are, it needs to deliver maximum nutrition to customers, because we do have a public health challenge here in Wales. Diabetes is on the increase. A lot of problems are due to food lifestyles. So we try and work with Public Health Wales and the NHS to kind of nip that in the bud with children. It's not easy, but we'll give it a damn good go. So what we're looking at is, I mentioned earlier where we can add value. For example, tomatoes grow well in the summer when it comes to schools. Schools aren't open in the summer. They're ripe. So we're on a project where we've introduced, where we're making bolognese sauces and pizza bases from tomatoes grown in Howell. But something else that seemed to grow extremely well this year and last year as well are things like chard, spinach, kale, courgettes. Now, a lot of customers don't really get what they are. They're highly nutritious, they grow well, and they're quite profitable for the growers, is my understanding. But there isn't a market there for them. Trying to sell chard and kale to anybody, let alone schools, is quite a difficult one. So what we're looking at is a project of new product development, working on introducing those kind of projects into standard lines. Beef bolognese, spaghetti bolognese with added chard and spinach. And we've already seen the fibre, the tests came back yesterday, the lab results came back, and already iron, as you'd expect, fibre and iron content is improved by introducing those kind of veg. But we've got to do it carefully, not by stealth as such, but you've got to take the children and the caterers on with them. So this is kind of what we're doing, is not only trying to work a little bit closer with the suppliers. There is a cost there, because indigenously grown veg does carry a premium. By and large, it's perhaps 50 to 80% more, but there's other benefits there as well. Looking at the nutrition side, and critically then making sure that children, in this instance, it's accepted by the children as well, because if they don't eat it, then it's all a bit of a waste of time, isn't it? Na ni, fi'n credu fi mewn ar amser, o di hwnna'n oreit, beth yw 5 munud ar 20? Gobeithio bod hwnna wedi bod yn oreit i chi, just bach o braslun, bit of an overview of a couple of things that kind of we're involved in. Na ni, diolch am wrando. Thank you.
Grêt. Diolch yn fawr iawn i ti, Edward. Wel, os oes modd smyglo moron a kale a chard mewn I meatballs, mae angen I fi gael gafel yr heini, achos fydden nhw'n handi iawn yn tŷ ni, mae hynna'n sicr. I was just saying I would like to get my hands on those meatballs that has had chard and spinach and kale smuggled into them, because they will hopefully go down a treat in our house. So yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn I ti, Edward. Thank you very much, Edward. So that's just given us an insight, isn't it, to how how complex our supply chains really are, and it's not as simple as you know, getting a carrot out of the ground and putting it on the plate. So, but one key thing that Edward did say was that there are opportunities for us here in Wales. And that's where we come in Farming Connect, as Edward mentioned. So we can support businesses who are looking to diversify into new sectors. So if any of you think that you have some land that could lend itself well to horticulture and growing some veg, then come and talk to us, because we've got a suite of different support mechanisms for you.